Good evening, I'm Elizabeth Farnsworth. Jim Lehrer is off. On the NewsHour tonight, a Bosnia update. Charlene Hunter-Gault talks with the administration's new point man. Presidential politics. Kwame Holman reports on the Pennsylvania Avenue face-off. Plus, Shields and Gigot on the week's politics. And the Utah wilderness. Tom Bearden looks at how much is enough. All tonight on the NewsHour.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by the Archer Daniels Midland Company, ADM, supermarket to the world. And by New York Life, yet another example of New York Life's wise investment philosophy. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
China announced today it plans to conduct a new round of military exercises off the coast of Taiwan. This third round of war games will start next week. The air and sea exercises will be held even closer to the island than the previous ones. Yesterday, the Pentagon reported China had promised not to attack Taiwan, but today White House spokesman Mike McCurry said he could not confirm those reports.
We take a very dim view of these exercises. We think they are unnecessarily provocative, and we believe the issue of Taiwan ought to be addressed through a peaceful dialogue. We've been critical, as you know, of the exercises themselves. We have raised our concerns directly with the People's Republic about the nature of these exercises and encouraged utmost caution to assure that they don't exacerbate an already tense situation.
China ended war game missile testing today with a demonstration of firepower 40 miles from the coast of Taiwan. China has said its military maneuvers are intended to curb pro-independence sentiment on Taiwan. The island is preparing for its first direct presidential election on March 23rd. China claims sovereignty over Taiwan. In Bosnia today, a U.S. soldier was shot and wounded near Tuzla. The incident occurred when Army Specialist Sean Austin confronted an intruder at the American base camp. A NATO spokesman said Austin is hospitalized in stable condition with a shoulder wound. His injuries are not considered life-threatening. The intruder fled the scene. It was the second time an American soldier has been shot since the peacekeeping force deployed last December. First Lady Hillary Clinton will make an official visit to Bosnia March 23rd. Mrs. Clinton will spend time with American troops in Tuzla. She will also visit soldiers' families in Germany. In Israel today, the Israeli military said it would lift travel restrictions on Palestinians within the West Bank. Roadblocks throughout the area had confined Palestinians to their towns and villages. An army statement said Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank would still be barred from entering Israel. The blockade was imposed nearly 3 weeks ago after a wave of militant Muslim suicide bombings began in the Jewish state. 58 people were killed in those attacks. President Clinton welcomed Irish Prime Minister John Bruton at the White House today. Mr. Clinton accepted a crystal bowl filled with shamrocks from Bruton, a symbol of St. Patrick's Day, which is Sunday. On a more serious note, the leaders discussed the struggle for peace in Northern Ireland. Bruton renewed his call for the Irish Republican Army to lay down its arms. He said that was the only way the IRA's political wing, Sinn Féin, could join in the peace talks.
I want to stress that the only qualification required of any party for participation in those talks is that they should not support a campaign of violence. And I ask the IRA to reinstate the ceasefire so that Sinn Féin will be able to take their unique and deserved part in the talks that will be starting on the 10th of June.
Sinn Féin leader Gerry Adams is also commemorating St. Patrick's Day in the United States. A spokesman said Adams was not invited to the White House because of renewed IRA attacks. In the budget story, President Clinton signed a stopgap spending bill late today. It will keep the government running through next week. The current spending authority expired at midnight. Congress and the president now have another week to negotiate a budget compromise for the rest of the fiscal year. Congressional Republicans agreed to vote sometime this month on a line-item veto. It would allow the president to veto individual items in spending bills without having to veto the entire measure. Democrats said there was a reasonable chance they would support the bill. In the tobacco liability story, the maker of Chesterfield cigarettes today settled lawsuits with 5 states. They were suing to recover millions of dollars paid to Medicaid recipients with smoking-related illnesses. The Liggett Group agreed to pay the states up to 7.5% of its annual profits for 25 years. It will help cover current and future health care costs for smokers. On Wednesday, Liggett also announced a tentative settlement in a class action suit brought by addicted smokers. AT&T will lay off 18,000 workers, many fewer than originally announced. The telecommunications company said in January it would eliminate about 40,000 jobs over the next 2 years. The company reduced the number of layoffs because more employees than expected took buyouts or found other jobs within the company. That's it for the news summary this Friday. Now it's on to a Bosnia update. The face-off on Pennsylvania Avenue, Shields and Shigo, and a dispute over Utah's wilderness. First tonight, an update on the Bosnia peace process. Charlene Hunter-Gault has that.
The big guns that ripped apart Sarajevo and other Bosnian towns are quiet, and thousands are trying to get their lives back to something resembling normal. But the peace, brought about by the Dayton Accord and 60,000 international troops, has been a nervous one. Just today, an American soldier was shot and wounded by an intruder at his base camp south of Tuzla. Also, an important deadline approaches on Tuesday, March 19th. 5 suburbs around Sarajevo are supposed to revert to Bosnian government control. 4 of the 5 have already been transferred. But militant Serbs have only grudgingly given up control, demanding all Serb residents depart rather than live with Muslims. They set fire to houses and buildings, and there was no intervention from NATO troops to stop the destruction and intimidation. There were also reports of intimidation by some Muslim groups. Then there's the issue of pursuing indicted war criminals, such as Bosnian Serb General Ratko Mladic. That still thwarts the international peacekeepers. Mladic, who went skiing before news cameras, and Bosnian Serb President Radovan Karadzic still appear in public, but have yet to be arrested by NATO troops. Many of these problems will be pursued in diplomatic conferences this coming week. Handling the issue for the United States will be Acting Assistant Secretary of State John Kornblum, the man who replaced Richard Holbrooke as the Bosnia point man for the Clinton administration. I talked with him earlier today at the State Department.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Just briefly, first, today's news. There was a U.S. soldier shot in Tuzla. What can you tell us about how it happened and what his condition is?
Well, I think what I can tell you is more or less what the Army has announced. That is that he was on patrol. He encountered someone who shot at him, hit him. He has a wound. I think it's in his shoulder. He's not in any danger. And these are the kinds of incidents that one encounters in this kind of situation.
There's a meeting scheduled for Monday in Geneva with all 3 of the Balkan leaders and Secretary Christopher.
Yeah.
Is this a crisis meeting?
No, not at all. In fact, it's a meeting designed to make sure that we don't have difficulties. The 19th, which is Tuesday, is the 90th day after the beginning of implementation, so-called D+90. This first phase has been complicated, but has been fairly clear-cut. Military forces were separated, security was guaranteed, borders were redrawn, and it was very much within the responsibility of I4, the military forces, to do this. Now that this stage has been reached, the next stage is going to be quite difficult. It's going to be changing behavior, bringing the agreement to people, making it living for them, resettling families, pursuing economic reconstruction. And our impression, after lots of discussions that we've had over the past couple of weeks, was that it would be useful to take advantage of the presence of Secretary Christopher. Secretary Christopher is not going to Geneva specifically for this meeting. He is there to address the Conference on Disarmament, on important nuclear nonproliferation issues and testing. And so we're taking advantage of his presence there, inviting other members of the contact group at my level, the so-called political directors level, to, with the 3 presidents, to both discuss which issues will be important in this new phase and to help give a political impulse to the phase which is beginning.
Well, there are many people now, as you probably know, who are saying, including Admiral Leighton Smith, who is in charge of the international force, saying that the military side has proceeded well, but that the civilian side, the political side, is problematic. And we've seen in the evacuation of the Sarajevo suburbs, we've seen violence, we've seen fires set. You were just there yourself.
Yeah, I was there on Monday, yes.
Intimidation, I understand, by both sides. Tell me what you saw there and how much of a concern this is.
Well, the concerns are real and the judgments are correct, but of course they're only half the story. The agreement is designed to go in stages. And the first stage was, in fact, the military separation. And in military parlance, D+90 is the point that we've reached now, and the first phase has been very successful. It is correct to express concern about the next steps because they are really deep steps. They are where the behavior of people has to change, where their commitment to overcoming the hostilities and the wounds and also the hatreds which led to this war has to become real, not on paper, but real.
But when you see what you saw, I mean, tell me, you
yeah,
saw
I saw lots of things. And
tell us what you saw.
I saw a suburb which is already war-torn, as they say, in which there were lots of people moving out, in which buildings were on fire.
Which one was that, Alicia?
This was Alicia that I went through, yes. And so these are all real things.
Were these fires set?
They were set by people who were leaving.
The Serbs?
The Serbs, yeah.
But they were also, it's also reported that there were Muslim
yeah, I wasn't there when this was happening. This was after Muslim control happened, that there were Muslim looters, yes. This is all very deplorable. But of course, it reflects what we found when we got there, which is a country with the deepest resentments and confrontations, which after all led to fighting and war.
But what could be done? I mean, for example, these people who've been left, the Serbs who chose to stay in some of these suburbs tend to be elderly people. Now, the international force has encouraged the Serbs to stay, but the people are complaining that they're not doing anything to protect them against this violence and intimidation.
Well, that's not their job. I mean, they did try and guarantee general security as this was happening, but the real task now, and that's again one of the tasks that we probably will discuss in Geneva, is to build up a civilian police force.
Well, is anything going to change in terms of what the international forces can do? I mean, do you still have confidence that the local forces can handle this, given all that you've seen and all that's happening?
At this point, of course, no. That's, again, one, but we have a group called the International Police Task Force, which is building up to have about 2,000 police monitors. We have police building programs, advice programs. A strong federal police is being set up. And so all of these, that in a way, again, goes back to the reason for this meeting in Geneva. All of these are very difficult internal tasks, which are all written down in Dayton, by the way. We've known this was coming. I think the point here is not that we're meeting some new crisis or there is a whole raft of unforeseen questions, but rather we've known this was coming. And we knew that once we got through the first phase of separating the forces, that the next phase would be this very difficult phase of establishing civil society is what we're really talking about. And as you know, we're aiming for elections in August or maybe early September, and to make sure that these elections are a success, a very strong sense of civil society has to be begun, and that is what this next phase is going to be about.
So you say there have been no surprises at this point?
Not really. I mean, that would be a foolhardy thing to say. There have been so many things happening that a lot of them have been surprising, some of them bad, some of them good surprises. But I think it is safe to say that the implementation of the agreement is as such on track that certainly this first phase of establishing the entities, of drawing the borders, of separating the forces has proceeded really quite satisfactorily. But we're not at all not at all overly optimistic about what the next phase is going to bring.
Has what you've experienced so far caused you to rethink any of the roles and positions that the U.S. has taken or that you've outlined for the international force?
I think not. I think, again, it's going about as it was agreed in Dayton. The basic point, again, to remember is that this is a very new kind of undertaking. For example, we've had not bad experience at all in getting access to grave sites for war crimes, etc., maybe better than we thought we would. On the other hand, some of the cooperation of local officials, including in the Bosnian Croat Federation, has not been as good or as satisfactory as we thought it should be.
Well, there are reports that this Bosnian Croat Federation is about to fall apart. I mean, isn't that the linchpin of the Dayton Accords?
It's a very important part of it.
So how real is that reporting that this is coming apart?
I don't think it's not about to fall apart. And in fact, again, if you go through, and this is, after all, a very detailed and somewhat pedantic agreement sometimes, if you go through all the steps taken, a lot of the structures have been set up. But we know that more needs to be done, that more cooperation and a more open and tolerant attitude among the people needs to be pursued. And this, again, is the reason that a good, strong political impulse right now could be very useful.
You mentioned access to the graves, to the grave sites. What about the pursuit of war criminals? There are reports of sightings on the ski slopes and elsewhere of indicted war criminals, Radovan Karadzic and Ratko Mladic. What's the status of that?
Well, I think there's general agreement that it's not either the job of IFOR, for example, or a reasonable task to ask it to do to go out on sort of search-out missions. As far as those who wish to, if you will, play cat and mouse with us or with IFOR, that is a problem which can't simply be solved by going out and getting them. There are posters around, the pictures are there, and IFOR, of course, will arrest them if they are able to do so, but they cannot be expected to mount major missions to try and go out and find them.
Finally, Mr. Secretary, let me ask you this. When we interviewed Richard Holbrooke, your predecessor, in his farewell interview when leaving the department, he said that his impulse, his passion about Bosnia had derived from going there and seeing neighbor killing neighbor, personal warfare, as it were. Mm-hmm. And what impulse? Do you have similar impulses, or is there another calling to your mission to Bosnia?
Well, I have, of course, worked with Mr. Holbrooke during this whole period. I was his senior deputy, and so shared all of these experiences, and all of the impressions and feelings that he had were very much mine also. I think now that he accomplished this great feat of putting this agreement together, a first very strong impulse of all of us is to make it work. But why make it work? Well, make it work because, first, the killing has now stopped. We have never sat down, would be silly to do so, to try to figure out how many lives have been saved, how many people haven't died, but it's in the tens of thousands because we got a ceasefire in the fall and because this agreement. That is a very strong feeling that we have. But secondly, this war really is, or really was, this situation really is and was a sort of cancer. It could spread to other places. It could hold back democratic development in other parts of Europe. And in the end, if left unchecked, it could really give the impression that if you're determined enough and angry enough and bloodthirsty enough, you can do whatever you want to do. And that is a very strong impulse to make clear that that kind of behavior isn't acceptable in the modern world. And in making this agreement work, I think all of us who work on this, and we have a very large team who's doing it, believe that we are also setting a signal for a peaceful development, which is really very necessary in this world that we're living in.
Well, Mr. Secretary, thank you.
It was very nice to be with you. Thank you.
Still to come on the NewsHour tonight, the face-off on Pennsylvania Avenue, Shields and Gigot, and a dispute over Utah's wilderness. But first, this is Pledge Week on public television. We're taking a short break now so your public television station can ask for support. That support helps keep programs like this on the air.
Hi, I'm Jeff Douglas of OPB's Oregon Field Guide. Too many talking heads. That's the knock a lot of critics and TV journalists put on the NewsHour when it first appeared on the scene more than 18 years ago. They said, who wants to see people debate and discuss world events? Viewers need action. If you can't get a picture of it, it isn't worth reporting. That's still the idea that dominates news coverage on CNN and the network news.
Hi, I'm Shelley Posey. Stories get condensed into little more than headlines. A minute on CNN and the networks is considered a lot of time to devote to a single news event. But Jim Lehrer knows better, and so do you. And so did the Columbia University journalism students who gave the prestigious Columbia School of Journalism Award to the NewsHour.
A kind of vindication? I'd say so. Talking heads may not be the most exciting ways to get the news, but it's certainly one of the most informative and sometimes the only way to get the depth of issues involved in a particular news story. The news broadcast that never underestimates the intelligence of its viewers is the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer. Considering that, don't you think the intelligent thing for you to do is to acknowledge that compliment with a gift of your own, a contribution of $35 to support journalism on OPB?
Or why not consider contributing a little extra? Give us a call at the toll-free number 1-800-551-9911 and pledge a gift of $75 for this handsome OPB black and gold tankard mug. Or how about an investment of $125 for this matching OPB black and gold sweatshirt? Or your $120 donation to OPB entitles you to an evening with Rick Steves. Here's your opportunity to receive a pair of tickets to a reception and travel lecture by Public TV's popular host of Travels in Europe with Rick Steves. It's on Sunday, March 31st at the Northwest Service Center at 6 p.m. And you'll also receive 2 books, Best Travels in Europe and Europe 101, autographed by Rick himself. So don't miss this opportunity to meet Rick Steves, and all it takes is your $120 contribution to OPB. So call us now at 1-800-551-9911.
Remember, we're offering you a $10 gift certificate to the OPB Store of Knowledge when you contribute $55 or more to OPB on your credit card. The OPB Store of Knowledge is chock full of items that will stimulate, educate, even entertain your whole family. Just ask for your $10 gift certificate when you make your contribution of $55 or more tonight to OPB. Be sure you use your credit card for speedy delivery of your thank you gift. 1-800-551-9911. These great gifts are 3 great ways to support TV worth watching. Call now. It's toll-free, 1-800-551-9911.
It's never been easier to show your support for OPB. When you make a pledge, you can choose to use your credit card. You can send us a check for the full amount, or the easiest way yet, by taking advantage of OPB's installment plan. That way, you can spread your payment out over a period of time. Becoming a member of OPB couldn't be simpler, so go to your phone right away and call 1-800-551-9911.
Hello, I'm Bill Moyers. For over 20 years, for a third of my life, Oregon Public Broadcasting has been bringing you exceptional programming like The Civil War, Sesame Street, great performances, Frontline, and, of course, Healing in the Mind. But we couldn't do this at Oregon Public Broadcasting without your support. You are the public in public broadcasting. Now, we need your support in the form of your moral commitment and your financial commitment to keep Oregon Public Broadcasting bringing you this outstanding programming that truly makes a difference in all of our lives. There's a number on the screen right now. That number is directly related to our need and your response. If you'll call that number and make your pledge to Oregon Public Broadcasting, well, when I'm 80 years old, I'll be back to thank you again and to ask you again, because you'll be keeping public broadcasting on the air.
Let's say you're already a current member of OPB but would like to do more. Well, why not encourage your employer to join in OPB's program to match employee contributions? There are many generous Oregon and Southern Washington companies who will match employee donations dollar for dollar, and in some cases even more. You and your company can make an investment that contributes to the quality of life in communities large and small all around the state. All you need to do is call 1-800-551-9911.
And this clever book, Where to Find the Oregon in Oregon, is yours when you contribute $60 or more to OPB. It's a comprehensive guide to special places that represent the essence of Oregon. Listings from wineries, performances, bakeries, produce stands, local gathering places, restaurants, museums, even country inns, and regional notes describing easily accessible flora and fauna viewing spots. This essential guide to Oregon's local, natural, and cultural experience is a must-have, and you can have it with your $60 donation to OPB at 1-800-551-9911.
If you've been meaning to call but just haven't found the time, well, please look again. Now's the time. We know you care about a program like the NewsHour, or you wouldn't be watching right now. But if you're not an OPB member, you're relying on someone else's generosity to keep your favorite programs on the air. Isn't it time that you return the favor? We only need one more call to make this a successful break, and that's yours.
And before we go, I'd like to remind you about a couple of gifts we have for you tonight. Remember, when you make a generous pledge of $125, you can have this distinctive OPB black and gold sweatshirt as our gift, or a pledge of $75, and we'll give you this handsome tankard mug. Take your choice, but call toll-free 1-800-551-9911. Now, it's time to return to the NewsHour on member-supported OPB.
If you'd like to mail in your contribution to OPB, here's the address: Oregon Public Broadcasting, P.O. Box 4373, Portland, Oregon 97208.
Now, presidential politics and what happens when the major candidates are also major players in Washington. This was the week Senate Majority Leader Bob Dole took a commanding lead in the Republican delegate count and drove Steve Forbes out of the contest. Kwame Holman reports on how the looming face-off between Dole and President Clinton is affecting the course of legislation in Congress.
Bob Dole returned to Washington on Tuesday with his nomination as the Republican candidate for president almost a mathematical certainty. Judging by his response to questions, the Senate Majority Leader is ready to fight much of the upcoming election campaign right there on Capitol Hill.
President Clinton was very critical of the cuts in environmental programs that Republicans are proposing in this budget bill that you're dealing with here now. Are Republicans vulnerable on environmental issues in this election?
Well, obviously we're concerned about the environment, but we're not out trying to devastate the environment. This is 1996, and President Clinton's getting an early start on November. He's going to need it, but he's getting an early start.
The cleanup at this site is now stopped. We have run out of money.
President Clinton had spent Monday in Wallington, New Jersey, inspecting a toxic waste site. Cleanup of the site had begun under the EPA's Superfund program, but hasn't been completed. The president linked the delay in the cleanup to the policies of the Republican-led Congress.
This budget impasse has been used by Congress and this crazy way of running the government by continuing resolution instead of a budget to slowly and quietly keep the EPA from doing its job. The EPA is now operating at about a 15% cut from its last year's budget. All that remains to be done is to finish the job of purging the soil of that site of the poison chemicals. I can't think of why we ought to tolerate this in Wallington or anywhere else in the country. But
the president's visit to New Jersey wasn't officially a campaign stop, but it had all the appearances of one, according to Missouri Senator Kit Bond.
Oh, that was a bell ringer. The political pundits and spinmeisters must have been rubbing their hands together in glee.
Bond, chairman of the committee that handles EPA's funding, said it was the EPA's decision to stop the cleanup in New Jersey.
We told EPA, go out and spend your money where there's a human health risk. You got more than enough money to do that. So either one of two things, Mr. President. Either EPA decided that Wallington, New Jersey site was not posing a risk to human health, which would have been a vitally important factor that reporters could ask the president about at his news conference. Or if there was a real risk to human health, and EPA had staged the slowdown to give the president a political forum.
With the two major presidential candidates leading from opposite ends of Pennsylvania Avenue, it's inevitable that the early focus of the campaign will be on Washington. But Mississippi's Trent Lott, the Senate Majority Whip, says he doesn't think things are at that point yet.
I think it's a little early yet. I don't think that we're in the total presidential campaign mode yet.
It was Lott who ran things in the Senate while Dole fought off challengers for the Republican presidential nomination. But now Dole can be back at his job almost full time, and Lott says Dole can score political points there too.
You know, I still believe, and I believe that Majority Leader Bob Dole believes, that the best politics is to get things done for America. When you do the job, you do what's right for the country, there's plenty, political benefit to go around for everybody.
And it appears Senator Dole is getting things done. Reportedly, he's just rounded up enough Republican votes to pass the line item veto. That measure gives the president the power to veto individual parts of legislation while accepting the rest. The line item veto is a major unfinished element in the House Republicans' contract with America. It had been bottled up in negotiations for more than a year until Dole intervened.
I want to thank him for his...
The Senate this week also made progress toward approving a catch-all spending bill to fund the federal government's operations through September, the end of the fiscal year. The measure ended a long-standing impasse and came only after a majority of Republicans, including Dole, finally agreed to the president's and Senate Democrats' demands for more money for education.
I mean, absolutely we need to pay the interest off on the debt, but you don't save the children of the next generation by savaging the children of this generation.
And despite their charges, the president was attempting to create a phony campaign issue out of the environment. Republicans apparently have agreed to add more money there, too. But increasing spending doesn't sit well with all Republicans, particularly those in the House.
And if you don't fund these things, President Clinton says, we're going to close the government down and it'll be the Republicans' fault and they're extremists. Give me a break.
But Trent Lott doesn't believe compromising with the president on spending will cost Dole Republican support.
No, I don't think it'll come to that at all. I think it's important we stay in touch with each other across the Capitol and across the aisle. I think we need to listen to concerns of members that feel like, it has already gone too far. Frankly, my own personal disposition leans much closer to what the House Republicans think about this omnibus spending bill. I think it spends way too much. But it also involves leadership. Now, leadership can stand around and throw stones and nothing happen. Or you can get out there and lead. And Bob Dole has been willing to step up to that task.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now a look at the Pennsylvania Avenue face-off and other matters with Shields and Gigot. That's syndicated columnist Mark Shields and Wall Street Journal columnist Paul Gigot. Welcome.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Paul, this is unique, isn't it, to have the Senate Majority Leader and the President in a campaign against each other?
It absolutely is. I think it's the first time ever the Senate Majority Leader has been the nominee of a major party, and the first time since Garfield that a leader of one of the two houses of Congress, he was Speaker of the House more than 100 years ago. So you really do have a face-off that's unusual, and an awful lot of the back and forth and the agenda setting will be done here in Washington.
And you figure that the campaign really begins now, and in the next 4 months we'll see it in the battles that they have or the cooperation that they have.
Well, there are some people who are saying, in fact, that this election may be settled between now and before the convention.
You mean settled in however the legislative
That's
agenda
right.
comes
And whoever
out?
gets the high ground in this battle, whoever sets the terms of debate, whether or not this election becomes a referendum on Bill Clinton's performance or whether it becomes a referendum on what the Republican Congress is doing. How that debate is framed may determine who wins this election.
It's interesting because they need each other. Neither one wants to be seen as the blocker of, or as the cause of gridlock. They need each other, and yet they're also opponents.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, other Senate Majority Leaders obviously have tried to use the position in the past. Howard Baker, Republican, tried to run for president for Majority Leader. Didn't work. Lyndon Johnson
came back, and I think that's the closest parallel in my lifetime. After the Democrats nominated their ticket in 1960, Johnson as vice president, they came back for rump session of the Senate with an ambitious agenda, which went nowhere. And they quickly got out and started their campaign, as traditionally was done on Labor Day instead. I think this is a different one. Bob Dole is obviously a lot more comfortable in the Senate than he is on the campaign trail. He is not a natural candidate. He's not terrible. It's not a congenial setting for him. And this is where he likes it. It was an interesting editorial that the Chicago Tribune endorsed Bob Dole, and they said that he has stood against the worst excesses of the Clinton administration and against the worst instincts of the Republican revolutionaries. And it's interesting, Dole has a triangulation strategy, and that is to show that he is the effective, get things done guy who can push things through and keep in check maybe some of the more extraordinary impulses of those in his own ranks in Congress. And I think he will have more cooperation, Elizabeth, than would have been expected a year ago, because all of a sudden, every Republican member of the House, his fate, fortune, and future is tied to how Bob Dole does.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's a good strategy for him, though, to be playing from these strengths?
Well, I think there's a lot of danger in it for Bob Dole. I agree with Mark that he's going to get a lot of cooperation from the House side, because the House discovered last year that you cannot govern from Congress. I mean, they tried. They offered historic legislation, risky votes on Medicare and a variety of other things. What did it get them? Zippo. So they've got to now, they would like to get some progress. And what they need, but the danger for Bob Dole is that the Senate Democrats are not going to play lay down here and decide to let him pass them. They're going to try to block as much as they possibly can. And if Bob Dole and Bill Clinton agree on everything, the voters might just decide, hey, why not keep these guys in their current positions? The best argument that Bob Dole has is that real change is not going to happen in Washington as long as Bill Clinton sits in the White House. He has to make the vetoes that the president has made and that the president is likely to make if the Republicans handle their legislative strategy well. He has to make those vetoes the issue.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's the question. They have to decide, the Republicans do, whether they're going to try and pass a program or they're just going to send vetoable items to the president
and
to
what
veto.
about the Republican freshmen? I mean, if Dole decides he wants to lead in this way, or he clearly has decided he wants to lead in this way, will they follow him? There's a lot of disarray in the House among Republicans, isn't there?
There is a lot of disarray. I mean, the Speaker has been wounded. I don't know if it's mortally wounded, but he's certainly been wounded badly.
We hardly see him.
He's really almost disappeared. And Dole and Speaker Gingrich in the last sort of 2 months of 1995 became the good cop, bad cop. Which worked to Dole's advantage, but didn't work to the Speaker's advantage. So the House Republicans are a wild card. I don't think they're going to be nearly as homogenous or unified as they were earlier in 1995. Each one now has to start thinking about whether he or she wants to return.
Paul, what issues do you think that Dole will emphasize?
Well, I think you're going to see him emphasize a lot of the issues that Bill Clinton has already vetoed. I think welfare reform is going to be a central issue. There's a debate now in the Dole campaign. Should we even send another welfare bill to Bill Clinton, give him another chance to sign something and take credit for it, or should we use this issue? You know, the president's got ads up now saying he's for welfare reform. Well, he's vetoed the welfare reform twice, and he's against even the governor's compromise that all 50 governors have agreed to. That's going to be a big issue. Tax cuts is going to be a big issue. The size and the scope of government and all of its parameters are going to be issues. But I think instead of wrapping everything into this one big bill that they did last time, and the president vetoed without suffering any political price, they're going to try to do rifle shots. They're going to try to take individual legislation and say...
So there won't be one big budget bill.
So voters might even notice for a change. Wouldn't that be nice for the Republicans?
That voters would notice the specifics.
Right. We'll say, all right, welfare reform, let's take this up and show that, in fact, he is vetoing it, even though he claims to be supporting it, and try to really define the president through what he's against.
Well, do you think, bottom line, do each of you think that we're just going to see gridlock, or that there will be a lot of cooperation then? I mean, it's in both of their interests to have each.
That's right. No, I think Bill Clinton obviously is not going to sit idly by and sign legislation which he feels is not in his interest or the country's interest or the party's interest or whatever. He is not, and he has a gift, a flair, and a penchant, really, for framing issues very advantageously, which I think he proved in 1995. And so he's not going to be just a passive player here. But I do think that Bob Dole has to show both leadership and effectiveness. That's going to be his theme in 1996, and that's where he gets higher marks than does the president. The president is seen as more caring and more concerned and perhaps more in tune to what's going on in the nation. But Bob Dole has a reputation among voters of being showing more leadership and more effectiveness than Bill Clinton. So he has to somehow deliver on that pledge.
Yeah, but he doesn't want to be a leader and effective in the Congress. He wants to get to the other side of the street, and there's a danger, and the Democrats are already saying, Bob Dole's a great legislative mechanic. Wonderful guy if you want something out of a subcommittee. We need somebody, a vision up on, he's got to worry, if he's chasing John Chafee, a liberal Republican, for that 60th vote to break the filibuster, if he spends all his time on that, he's going to lose.
Okay, let's move on to Forbes. We talked about this a little the other night. What is the impact now of Forbes pulling out?
Yeah, I don't think it has any impact on the race at all.
You don't think so?
The question is, what will be his legacy? I think a couple of things were revealed about the Forbes candidacy. First of all, his message of hope, growth, and opportunity got a lot of support in the press and very editorial boards, but it really didn't strike much of a spark with voters, Elizabeth. I think that he will be remembered more, in fact, for his attacks upon Bob Dole. I mean, Bob Dole, in the months of, and especially in Iowa and New Hampshire and the surrounding media markets, they plummeted because of the negative attacks upon him. And I think when you're talking about spending $30 to $45 million, he would now be joined at the hip to Phil Gramm, as people who spent between them $70 million, and it kind of proves that maybe money isn't everything in politics. But I really don't think that there's going to be a lasting economic legacy. I think that the supply side school was really exposed as sort of politically limited and overwhelmingly elitist.
Do you agree with that?
Couldn't disagree more. Across the board, totally. I think the Forbes contribution was by and large healthy for the Republican Party. Ever since the Bush recession, if you will, the economic agenda has been dominated by Democrats. The president got elected in part on it. The Republicans had wanted to talk only about the size of government. I think what Forbes did and showed that there was fairly substantial support within the party for his message of putting the economy back into the debate on the Republican side. Whatever happened to the growth agenda? Back in the 80s, the Republicans controlled that agenda. And he's saying Republicans can't win in November unless they have that. And I think that's a very good message for Bob Dole, and one that he can take to the voters in November and take on the underperformance of the Clinton economy.
Well, Paul and Mark, that's all the time we have. Thanks. Now a dispute about how much wilderness is enough. Next week, the Senate is expected to vote on legislation that would determine how much of Utah's land should be given the official designation of wilderness and preserved from development. Tom Bearden reports.
The view is simply astonishing. A 1,000-foot deep canyon sliced through rock so red it's almost luminous. People from all over the world come to southern Utah to gaze in wonder at what the Colorado River has done over the millennia. Some of them are equally astonished when they notice there is also a large potash mine in the bottom, right on the edge of Canyonlands National Park. In some ways, it's a vision of what two opposing viewpoints in Utah would like to see: land preserved in a pristine state versus developing some of it to extract natural resources. The Utah congressional delegation's bill would designate 1.8 million acres. A bill supported by environmentalists would designate more than 3 times as much, 5.7 million acres. Terry Tempest Williams is a Salt Lake City author and environmentalist. She argues earnestly for the larger proposal.
This is a landscape of the imagination. These are canyon walls that rise upward like praying hands. This is a landscape that reminds us of a bedrock democracy. It is what has always held us as Americans. And to let these lands go in the name of expediency, in the name of economic growth, when our very health and souls are at stake, would be a great mistake.
Philip Bimstein also supports the 5.7 million acre proposal, not for spiritual but for economic reasons. He's the mayor of Springdale, Utah, a small resort town near Zion National Park. Springdale is scrambling to build more motel rooms.
I think that wilderness designation is crucial to the economic future of Utah in general. And because Springdale is a town that's situated right at the edge of the wilderness, is surrounded on all four sides by it, and we're trying to cultivate an image as a destination resort. Wilderness designation enhances our quality of life for the residents that live here, and it also, I think, adds to the future of our economy, which is already booming as a result of it.
But opponents of the environmentalist bill, like Louise Liston, say it's nonsense to think adding more wilderness would help the economy. A county commissioner in Garfield County, Liston says the real problem is the federal government already controls 98% of the land.
In order for us to take care of the services that 3 million visitors demand, we have to do that on a tax base that 4,000 people give us, on less than 2% of the land being private property. The tourists come in and they leave their garbage, they get lost, they get hurt, they require law enforcement, and we have to provide all of those services to them on a very constrained, limited budget.
Opponents of the 5.7 million acre bill say it would also utterly foreclose their economic future, because wilderness designation would prevent the development of the area's rich natural resources and the jobs that go with it. Liston says the ridge behind her is a good example of what would be lost. It's called 50 Mile Mountain, the northern edge of an enormous plateau that extends into northern Arizona. It's part of the area environmentalists want to see become wilderness. If it does, it would scuttle plans to build an underground coal mine. Roger Holland is a city councilman in the nearby town of Kanab. He thinks the mine would be much more valuable to his town than wilderness.
It would be incredibly good for our economy. It would mean 900 jobs, good-paying jobs, almost twice what the average job, pay scale is in the state of Utah.
You have to have some type of an industry for the dads to work at, so you can have the moms and the daughters and the sons run the service stations and motels and restaurants.
Many ranchers who have grazed cattle on the public lands for generations say they would also suffer, even though they would still be allowed to graze in any new wilderness areas. Hardy Red says the reality is that today's cowboys drive pickups and tow their horses long distances to reach the rangeland. Wilderness areas prohibit motorized vehicles, making continued grazing there impractical.
My experience is that people who run livestock in wilderness areas say, yeah, they allow us to run the livestock, but they restrict us so much, they make it uneconomic or make it very, very difficult to, like, go in and repair a water system or haul salt in or maintain fences or things like that.
Ken Slight runs a guest ranch right near one of Red's ranges near Moab, Utah. He thinks those who oppose the environmentalist bill are losing sight of the big picture. A former cattleman himself, he now guides tourists on raft trips through Canyonlands National Park.
This country belongs to the American people. It doesn't belong to the Hardy Reds or the other ranchers. It belongs to the American people. They are using the utility of it. They're using it. We can't afford them to ruin it. I feel like we've got a lot of land here, but when you really look at it, most of it is despoiled already. And we've only got a few pockets of wilderness left, true wilderness, and I think we need to protect it.
But Red says creating wilderness can do more harm than good, and points to Canyonlands National Park as an example.
In 1964, 4,000 people visited this area. Now that it's designated a park, last year, 400,000 people visited the area. They have a much greater impact on the land. In fact, there is some argument that designating parks or designating wilderness has more adverse impact on the land than leaving it alone and leaving it undefined and not attracting people to it.
People are coming with or without designation of wilderness. We've seen that already in the national parks. So designation of wilderness is not going to bring any more.
The two sides can't even agree on what wilderness is. The environmentalists say their 5.7 million acre proposal meets the guidelines established in the Wilderness Act. Pristine, untrammeled by man, no structures or roads. Louise Liston says much of the land is far from pristine and accuses environmentalists of inflating the amount that qualifies and thereby perverting the Wilderness Act.
Wilderness is now being proposed by exception. And that means that it doesn't have to fit the criteria. And that's what the 5.7 million acre proposal is. We have hundreds of miles of roads, we have fences, we have water tanks, we have cabins. I mean, you know, they don't fit wilderness criteria.
Utah Congressman Jim Hansen says his 1.8 million acre bill would designate true wilderness and says it's backed up by a Bureau of Land Management study.
The BLM spent $10 million in 15 years, and they came up with a figure, finally, of 1.95. The legislation that we've introduced pretty well tracks that at 1.8, supported by the delegation, the governor, both houses of the state legislature, all of the county commissioners but one, and every elected official in the state of Utah.
But Jim Baca, who headed the BLM at the time and is now a consultant working under a Sierra Club grant, says the whole thing was political.
I think they tried to veil it as a study that was done like any other study, but in fact, of all the wilderness studies that have ever been done, or probably ever will be done, it was the most political. The staff at BLM, including the person who ran the study for the BLM at that time in their wilderness unit, said that it was political and that they were forced to do a lot of things that were unscientific, that weren't supported by the facts.
Baca says it's Hansen who's trying to pervert the act because his bill contains so-called hard release language, an unprecedented provision requiring the BLM to release all the land adjacent to the new wilderness for immediate development, foreclosing future wilderness expansion.
Hard release means that if you look at that acreage that was not considered for wilderness, you can never consider it for wilderness again. You cannot protect it for wilderness property values. You cannot do anything to it. It's open to development, and you can never look at it again. I've always thought it was unconstitutional. I don't know how you can tie the hands of future Congresses.
Terry Tempest Williams hopes Congress will look at more than just jobs in reaching a decision.
Wilderness is like a combustible log. Say the word and it ignites. It's too easy to say it's us versus them, it's environmentalists versus ranchers. I think the issue that is really at hand is, do we have the restraint, do we have the generosity of spirit, do we have the vision to grant these lands their own sovereignty, to extend our notion of community, to include all life forms, plants, animals, rocks, rivers, and human beings.
Hardy Red has another worry, that the years of arguing over dinner tables and in public meetings will have a permanent effect on the adversaries.
One of the virtues and one of the beauties of the West is not just the scenery. It's the good feeling that there are among people, the amiability, the kind of the more easygoing tolerance that I sense in the West. One of the things the wilderness debate has done is chipped away at those good feelings and divided us into us and them. That's a tragedy.
While Congress considers both bills, Utah is bracing for another onslaught of tourists this summer. Environmentalists say they want to make sure that what draws them here isn't destroyed. The people who live near those attractions say they want that too, but they also want to be able to make a living. Ultimately, Congress will have to decide how much wilderness is enough.
Again, the major stories of this Friday. China announced a new round of military exercises next week off the coast of Taiwan. Live fire war games will target areas close to the island. In Bosnia, an intruder shot and wounded a U.S. Army sentry guarding the American base camp near Tuzla. The GI is hospitalized in stable condition. And the Israeli military lifted travel restrictions on Palestinians within the West Bank, but they are still barred from entering Israel because of the recent wave of suicide bombings. We'll be back Monday night. I'm Elizabeth Farnsworth. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by the Archer Daniels Midland Company, ADM, supermarket to the world.